All right, welcome back, boys and girls, teachers. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to take your seats. Now for this session, you do need something to write on. You do need something to write with. So take that out quickly. Great. Teachers, you may need to guide your students during this process. So it would be quite nice if maybe you walked around a bit, or even if you want to do the activity yourself, that is fine as well. And at the outset, I must tell you that in this session, I do very little. I am going to guide you step by step on how to write your narrative paragraph. And you as a teacher, you can decide whether you want the kids to do this on their own quietly or whether you want them to do it in pairs. I suggest don't do more than 2 if you want to do it in groups, because then you're going to end up with more noise than anything else. So, you and I together are going to construct a narrative paragraph. And the topic I have given you is, I never thought it would happen to me. Now, the reason I've given you this topic is because you can interpret it any which way you want to. You can decide whether you want it to be a serious story or a funny story. You can decide whether you want to write as yourself or whether you want to take on a persona. Really, it is entirely up to you. So now, my learners, is where you start doing the thinking. And if by the end of this next session, you can at least get a paragraph together, you are well on your way of being able to write the perfect narrative paragraph and essay. So, step 1, I will give you 5 minutes for this. You are going to create a mind map like the one below and fill in the details. I've already got there. I never thought it would happen to me. So in this phase, you will now take 5 minutes and you will think about the story that you want to tell. Get going. Okay, I trust that that went well for you. Okay, remember the idea is not to write down these big long sentences. All you need to do is just write down points. So now what you have on your page is a very rough idea, a rough sketch of where you are heading with your essay or with your little narrative paragraph. So you should know who's involved, what's going to happen, what the main big problem is going to be, and how you are going to resolve that. The next step, step 2, is you are going to draw this triangle because we've done our mind map which gave us the rough idea. Now, this is where we start to flesh everything out. Now we become more specific. We decide, okay, this is what I want to introduce my thing with. I want to introduce it with a quote that talks about X, Y, and Z. Then I wanted to move to that point. Then I wanted to move to that point, and then the climax, and so on. In this phase, instead of writing points, you can just write down a phrase or one sentence, for each of these categories there. That is introduction and events and etc. You will find that on this triangle, there are dots there. The reason for the dots is each dot should represent, one more activity or one more thing that leads up to the climax. Something that adds to the problem, which makes the climax, almost unbearable. So right now, you are going to look at the instruction. I'm going to give you 6 minutes to copy that triangle and fill everything in. Look, dears, it doesn't have to be perfect. We are not looking for an Oscar-winning screenplay here. All we are doing now is checking that you are able to do the steps that are involved. Okay, so you have 6 minutes to do this in. Okay, so now you are one step closer to getting that essay of yours finished. Hey, so remember we started with the mind map where we just thought, okay, figured out the bare skeleton, who we want involved, and a kind of a rough idea of where we were heading with the story. In this step now, what we did was we fleshed it out a little bit more. Hey, we put some muscle onto the story, where now we know exactly, we've decided that we're going to speak about this event and that event and this event and that event. Now, what you have in front of you is actually called a proper plan for your essay. Once you've got your plan, you need to keep that plan next to you. Okay, because it is something that you will refer to continuously. You can't take your plan and then file it away, because the next step now is what when we are doing our first draft. I'm sure you've heard of that. I'm sure your teachers have told you that when you are doing your essays, you don't just write it out or don't just have a plan. You also need to have a first draft. This is the first time you start writing out your essay. So the first thing we are going to start with now is, how do we write an introduction? Now, you need to remember that an introduction needs to grab the person who's reading. They grab their attention. You must make sure that you've got your topic in your mind. You've got your triangle plan next to you. Your topic should be on that. You need to remember, we must know who is involved, what they are doing, where they are doing, when it is, maybe even why. Then you have to ensure that you use words that are interesting and exciting, because if you are hoping to grab the attention of whoever is reading, you must use words that are exciting. You can't just use big, small, happy, sad, ugly, and pretty anymore. You are in grade 9 now. You need to start thinking of words that are a little bit more exciting, a bit more meaty. And please, I'm going to reiterate, do not start with "one sunny day, my friends and I," or "it was late in the night and I went to bed." Think of something more exciting. Exciting ways to start a paragraph, I told you, or introduction, is you can start off with onomatopoeia. Ouch! It hurt when I looked at whatever, and you can carry on. That's just an example. Or you can start out with a quote, or you could say, "I remember my mother told me this," and whatever, and you can carry on from there. So remember, now you're going to write down 2 or 3 sentences which give me all the information that grabs me and tells me the context, what it is I can expect. You have 5 minutes in which to do this. Excellent. I'm not sure if you're working in pairs, but you're quite welcome to look at what each other has written. And teachers, I'm assuming that you are walking around and maybe helping your students as well. Or maybe even not, if you're not helping them, maybe trying and doing this on your own as well, just to try to fine-tune your skills. Hey, maybe at the end of it all, you can share your essay with them and they can share their essay with you. All right, now we come to a very important part, which is the body. And now the body will form the most part of what it is that you are writing. Now, when we are talking about the body, we are talking about the rising action. We are talking about everything we need to know before we reach the climax. The body bridges the gap between the introduction and the climax. So you need to remember that here you need to let us know what the problem is, what the conflict is. You don't have to say the problem is. You can just mention it in a very natural way in your essay. We also need for you to talk about the events which explain the conflict or show how the problem occurred. In other words, what happens that relates to the problem. You also have to remember that it has to make sense. This event leads on to the next, leads on to the next. If you look at that triangle that you've got on your page, the one that I had given you earlier on, you will find that I had put dots on that. And because I said each dot represents an event. Now this is what I was talking about. The rising action, what comes after the introduction and before the climax. And you need to remember that you still want to engage your readers. So you have to use adjectives, adverbs. See if you are feeling up to it. If you can even throw in one figure of speech, one of those that we did last week, if you can throw in one of those into it as well. Your idea is to make sure you give your reader all the information they need to be able to understand the climax when you reach it. For this, I will give you 6 minutes. Wonderful. Now, I think if you just even looked at your page, you can see already some kind of essay forming there. Hey, you just need to remember that we are doing one paragraph, so there's no need. Okay. Boys and girls, I'm going to start from the beginning with this slide because it seems that there was a problem with the sound and some of you were not able to hear me and all that there. I'm hoping that has been remedied. So I'm just going to go back to step 5. Step 5, as I said, is the climax. This is where it's the most exciting part. It's everything that we have been building up to. You need to remember that in the rising action, that is the body, we had developed the problem. We said, this is what is going wrong. This is how it is affecting me. Now we see the result of it in the climax. What you have to remember, as you can see in that yellowy green bit, that the climax is the most exciting part of the story. It is the part that the reader has been waiting for. So you need to thrill the reader. You need to make sure that that reader hasn't been waiting for nothing. You need to draw the reader into the action. So this would be the time for you to use those figures of speech, onomatopoeia, which is sound effects, crash, boom, whatever it might happen to be. Because this is where the reader is going to feel like, oh my word, I cannot believe this is happening. This is where the reader is going to be surprised or shocked or excited or thrilled or whatever the idea there might be. You need to remember that you need to use vivid descriptions, adjectives, adverbs, sentences that really, really make the reader feel like they are right on scene watching this. And in the rising action, we were creating suspense because you said this happened, then that happened, then this happened, then that happened. Now, in the climax is where you tell us the point that everything has led up to. The problem has unfolded and it has led up to whatever it is that you are going to talk about. And you have to remember that it must be logical. Okay, so you can't just have a climax dump there. Everything else that you've said in the rising action has to logically and naturally lead up to this climactic moment. Now you're going to do your own, and I am going to give you 6 minutes in which to do this. You may begin. Okay, I know that you've done a good piece of work. I can just feel it because it seems to be that your kids are really concentrating, hey? And now we're almost at the end. Finally, we come to the resolution and conclusion. Now, the reason I put this together is because usually one just leads into the other, and oftentimes when we are writing longer essays, we don't have many paragraphs for these here. It might be one for resolution and then the conclusion. So you will find here that for you, all you need to do is write down just 2 or 3 sentences which tell us what happened after the problem. You remember that now we are winding down the story. All the excitement is over. What has happened after the excitement? You have to show how your story ends. You remembered, I told you at the very beginning that every narrative piece of work must have a point. Your point will come now, right at the very end. What is the point? Did you learn from the incident? You know, is it something that you have to remember? Did it remind you that you have to remember about something else, you know, later on? Did it give you a life lesson? Whatever the case may be, it's really up to you. But remember, now we're winding down and we're coming to the point of the story. Okay? So you will get 5 minutes in which to write down your 2 or 3 sentences, starting now. Well, boys and girls, there you have it. You have just created your very own narrative paragraph. Now, the only thing left for you to do is for you to read it over, to edit it, check that there are no grammar errors, no spelling errors, those kinds of things. And maybe when you have some time, you can exchange your page with somebody who is sitting next to you. If not today, then tomorrow. And maybe you can see what someone else has written on the same topic that you had. I promise you, it is really quite fun. So that is our lesson for today, hey? Narrative writing. I hope you can remember quite a bit of it. Go through your diagrams that you have done, and I will see you again, same time, same place next week. Have a lovely afternoon, boys and girls.